This week, we welcome Mike Adler, Vice President of Product for NetWitness at RSA Security, to discuss, is the virtual SOC our new normal? In the leadership and communications section, burnout CISOs are a huge cyber risk. To build strategy, start with the future. 78% of organizations use more than 50 cybersecurity products to address security issues and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. With over half of enterprise security budgets going towards detection and response in 2020, the challenge is investing in solutions that can migrate and scale with your business. ExtraHop helps security teams spot threats up to 95% faster and respond 60% more efficiently in hybrid and multi-cloud environments with cloud-native network detection and response. Kick the tires in the full product demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 174, recorded May 18th, 2020, and we are broadcasting live. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in Colorado. Joining me from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island is my first co-host, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here.
Welcome, welcome. And on the lines, joining us remotely, is my second co-host, Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
Hey, Matt. Great to be here and great to be live.
Got the team together today for this first live stream in a long time.
It's awesome.
Beautiful
Join
thing.
us. Yeah, it is. Join us at InfoSec World 2020, June 22nd to 24th, now a fully virtual event. Security Weekly listeners save 15% off the InfoSec World main conference or World Pass. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2020. Click the register button to register with our discount code. Also, join the Security Weekly mailing list and receive your invite to our community Discord server by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe and clicking the button to join the list. I am actively monitoring it, so if there are questions during the show, I will do my best to answer them. Mike Adler serves as the Vice President of Product for the RSA NetWitness platform. Mike is responsible for setting product strategy, defining requirements, and building and shipping RSA security operations product portfolio. With more than 20 years of experience building and managing product organizations, Mike focuses on delivering quality and feature-rich products on a predictable timeline. Mike, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thanks, Matt.
Now, you came after me, so we never crossed paths at RSA. I was there from 2012 to 2014 on the Archer product line. I believe you came after that. Give us a little background how you got to RSA.
Yeah, I joined RSA in 2016, actually, after a stint at Constant Contact running their engineering and some product organizations there. Previous to that, I spent 9 years at Symantec, building product organizations, solving some of the biggest problems, and it feels a little old now, but having spent some time running the enterprise security antivirus product team, the Brightmail product team, and even helping to start the enterprise mobile security business unit at Symantec. Some of the things that I've done in my background.
Yeah, so what attracted you to the security operations portfolio, really focus around obviously the NetWitness acquisition that RSA did back in, I think it was late 2011, early 2012.
Correct. Yeah.
Time frame, right? And then a lot of acquisitions after that. Why the security operations focus?
Yeah, so I had spent obviously a fair amount of time at Symantec dealing with protection technologies and security controls. And as I, then got to spend time in Constant Contact, which was a SaaS provider of email marketing services to small and medium-sized businesses, I really got to see the amount of threats that were getting through those protective areas. And so, it really awakened in me back that cybersecurity impact and really drove out, I guess, the desire to say, well, how do we go back and, detect and then respond to threats that are getting beyond the security controls, and what do those technologies look like? And that led me to an opportunity with RSA Net Witness.
Awesome. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges in the SOC. And obviously, there are known challenges in a physical SOC environment. We talk about Paul's Enchanted quadrants, and we'll get to that a little later. Paul talks about bringing in log data, network data, endpoint data, threat intelligence, bring them together, right? And that is 2, 3, sometimes even 4+ products in the Security Operations Center. So we had challenges in the physical space, but we're also going to talk about some of the challenges now that a lot of us are virtual. So let's start on the physical challenge side.
Well, I agree with you. But with Paul, I think our lockstep, in the way that we think about even just the normal set of challenges that exist within the SOC environment. Today, bringing together all those data sets, I think I often describe it as we all see the tools of a analyst with 3 screens in front of them, trying to unify, copy and paste, and use all of the information available to them holistically. That's really hard. And so to engineer those systems, tie the data sets together, do it in a way that unifies the data in a way that enables you to find threats using a variety of tool sets, everything from machine learning and analytics all the way down to just simple good old-fashioned signatures and rules. As well as now having to keep all of that up to date and being able to respond in a really effective way quickly. Those were hard things to begin with. And now, of course, they're more challenging.
Right. And as we think about the shift to remote work, where do we see some of the new emerging challenges of dealing with a virtual SOC? I mean, are analysts on site because they're considered critical resources? Are they trying to do this remotely? I know Jason will have some insight here as well. But what are some of those emerging challenges now that a lot of people aren't on site anymore?
Yeah, so I think it really boils down to the challenges that security teams and analysts have in doing the jobs that they were used to doing on a day-by-day basis. And those challenges exist, obviously, because they're used to having 3 monitors and tying all that data together. And now they're most likely at home, VPN'd in, with not exactly the same speed and or setup, and trying to use those same set of tools. Now, hopefully you have a modern set of tools, and at least they're web-based, and you can try and do a lot of that work. But trying to bring those things together in a different work environment is now much, much more challenging. As well as the remediation, there's a bunch of assumptions that we used to have about who I could get together with and who I could communicate with, who I would be able to track down, how would I get more information, and when remediations would happen. And those are now incredibly much more challenging because where these threats are living may still be in the data center or in our cloud environments, but they're equally likely on a end user's computer system, which of course is no longer located in the office. And so now we're dealing with the challenge of the fact that the workforce is totally remote, and the way that they are accessing data has completely changed, which is changing the way that we respond to threats, as well as the types of threat vectors that are now available to attackers.
Yeah, well, that's dead on, right? So some of the challenges we've had is, you had mentioned folks VPNing in. A lot of at least our workforce doesn't even leverage VPN anymore. We have so many of our line of business applications in the cloud that they're not even, on a daily basis, they don't have to VPN into the network to get to the assets that they need, right? So for us, it was, how do we adjust to that, be able to baseline that traffic that's not coming across the network anymore, still continue to classify those users and systems and be able to protect and prioritize.
Yeah, that's a totally different, a different set of challenges. It changes the way you think about it. So I think one of the things that we're seeing is the rise and criticality of endpoint detection and response tooling, and being able to gather information off of the endpoint, monitor the endpoint, potentially even use that endpoint for network analysis and be able to get network traffic off of that endpoint so that you can understand the behaviors of the user and understand the behaviors of the endpoint itself and look at it from threats. And so I think that's one of the big changes that we're seeing. And I know a lot of activity from RSA Net Witness has been around the incorporation of RSA Net Witness endpoint into our customers' portfolio, where perhaps they had either a third party or they hadn't made the investment into an EDR tool, but now bringing that data set directly into their SIM has become really important over the last 90 days.
Well, I think there's three challenges that we're talking about, right? I think the first is the actual connectivity, and remotely can I get to all of the things I need to get to do my job, right? There's the collaboration aspect, right? Physical or remote. I need to be able to talk to people in my investigation, perhaps, to make sure to validate data and do a number of different things. And three is, how do I do incident response? At least begin in the SOC, begin that incident response process when I'm not in the office, and maybe probably now 100% of the systems I need to do incident response on are not in my physical location either, right? So I think those are three huge challenges of the SOC today, some of which can be solved by technology, correct?
Absolutely. I think, one of the ways, let's talk about one of the ways, the challenges that you talked about is just coordinating incident response. More now than ever, we've started to see about, orchestration. And typically when we've heard about SOAR tools in the past, we've heard about, the ability to automate playbooks and have, and be able to drive the automation. And that was going to, have a great efficiency gain for the SOC. Those tools, the ability to standardize your response playbooks, but to do so and manage them in a shared way has become incredibly important, because it actually goes after the exact problem that you're talking about, is how do I share my investigation and my data and the progress I've made along with the steps that I've taken with a broader set of people? Because shared Excel spreadsheets, wiki pages, even information in JIRA tickets, right? Some of the common ways that we've seen organizations do these kinds of things up to this point are actually much harder now to use because we're all remote. And so products like RSA Net Witness Orchestrator and other orchestration tools that provide virtual teaming, right? The ability to have playbooks as well as chatbots, as well as notebooks that track the results and the steps that have been taken, so that as opposed to dealing with lots of wiki pages and going procedure by procedure by procedure, you're now able to share all that information dynamically and be able to categorize a response. So that's one thing that we're seeing. The second challenge that you mentioned, I think that's really interesting, is around the fact that the systems that I now need to respond to may not actually be, in the same location that I am. And the good news there, I think, is that, there's a lot of work that either has been done up to this point or was queued up to be done that can now be accelerated by security organizations to tie together that security ecosystem, where you're tying together your detection and response tools to the actual security controls that enable security policy. And I think there's an opportunity to use some of the automation and the APIs engaged in the security ecosystem to solve for the fact that we're no longer directly able to maybe go to a firewall management tool or to go touch my AV system, but instead can automate those response procedures through an API, and that has become incredibly much more valuable.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. You can't go into your coworker's cubicle and go, "Hey, can you log into that system and check this out?" Right, with like a printout or like even like something on your phone, or bringing your laptop over and go, "Hey, can we work on this together?" So we have to find different, more creative ways to accomplish the same goals.
And I think there's been a lot of use of Zoom and all these other aspects, but I think it's not just picking up the phone and FaceTiming that gets the job done. It's about that unique ability to exchange information. Like you mentioned, you can't easily print something out and bring it over. You now have to share screen, or you have to have a journal that you can use and say, "Hey, I'm sharing my journal with you. Take a look at the steps I've done," or "Here's my search query. Can you run it and tell me what you see in its results?" Right. I think it's all that ability to share, having it innate into your security tools and into your security platforms has become much more valuable. And finding ways to do that within your existing tool set. Right now is the time where you sort of evaluate, or how do I get the tools to meet my needs? as someone who sells tools, and I don't want to get so focused there, it's still a people, process, technology problem. And so the question is, you have your people and they're in a different situation. So how do you adapt your process to make best use of the people and the tools that you have available to you right now?
Right. And you can also flip that the other way. Let's say you have a SOC and you had some really good processes down. You don't want to change your processes just because everyone's working from home. That's kind of why I led with technology, right? We have this process. Now we're working from home. Our process is still the same. I don't want to have to change my process now because we're working from home. We have to adapt different technology. I think we should be looking at technology that lets us do business as we normally would in the SOC, even though we're remote.
And I think, there's definitely a role for technology there. The tooling is incredibly important. I think we've seen, some of our customers have given us some great stories around the way that they've seen the value of the platform compared to some of their peers. Some of the presentations and customers that I've talked to, have really seen the value of not having to have multiple platforms and security tools that are trying to bring information together. And but you can also start seeing investments. As I said, we've had a lot of customers turn on RSA NetWitness Endpoint to give them that EDR visibility. And because they were able to do so as part of their existing platform, it didn't require a new technology platform. We've seen some folks adopt RSA NetWitness Orchestrator, as I mentioned in the automation and orchestration, bringing in technology where maybe they exposed a gap and, they needed to solve that gap with some technology that gave them some virtualization and some virtual componentry that allowed them to solve for the fact that everyone was going to be remote. And I think it's just a measure of, not trying to change. My advice is you never want to change too much at the same time, and because a lot has changed around us all at the same time. And so they're somewhat reassuring, like you said, of people coming to work and knowing that they can do their jobs and have the same procedures, or they're using the same tools, but supplanting that with tools that are going to make their lives a little bit easier along the way. Because at the end of the day, I look back and I look at it the way hopefully our customers are looking at it, which is, our customers and their organizations are depending on their security teams to still get the job done. Yes, the workforce is now remote or largely remote. The threats have changed because the network architectures have changed and the way that people are communicating and getting the work done, and the data is being transported over different paths. But our customers are still depending on their security organizations to secure the environment and make sure that the information is protected at all times. And so I think we have to adopt and find ways to react to the changing environment and make sure that, everyone within the security community is able to be successful in still accomplishing that core mission. Because the core mission, frankly, hasn't changed no matter what the environment around us has.
Right. Now, I think the other challenge that organizations are going to face in this is resource and budgets. If you're an organization that didn't have some of these tools in place, how do you get them onboarded quickly to account for this new environment? But that means I got to have access to my budget. I've seen some very interesting trends of budgets getting locked down or frozen because people are trying to figure out what's happening and where to make the right adjustments. But then if I'm a SOC that was also short on resources, how do I interview and bring new resources on board in an environment where there's nowhere to train them?
Yeah, so I think resources are harder to bring on board. There's no doubt about that. I do think that there's the opportunity, though, to bring on new technologies and to look for opportunities. I think, first and foremost, we've seen organizations go through phases. The first one, which I think we're probably at the end of now, is really about do the spend necessary to secure the organization while we go through this particular situation. Obviously, the reaction of COVID-19, employees working from home. What do we need to do, whether that was increasing VPN capacity, purchasing an EDR tool because we didn't have one, integrating the various pieces of the technology stack, and making sure that the base is recovered. So those became sort of, if I would say, the critical spending requirements to enable business to get done. That's sort of phase one. I think we're largely through that. I think we're in phase two, which is now a reevaluation of priorities. And I think what's becoming critical is, okay, in the world in which we find ourselves, and even as we reopen, what are the things that we need to do to make sure that we are not just in this emergency situation, but in a longer term work from home environment? What are the important things that we do to make sure that we drive out the value proposition and the security proposition of the organization. We have too many tools. Can we consolidate tools? Is there a way to make the things that we have today work better? Do we need to bring in different pieces to fill in some gaps? And so we've started to see spending in that area. And then I think we'll get to phase 3, which will be very different in the sense of where I think the market was heading and where it was going to be, where requirements are now different, right? So we've spent money in phase 1, we've spent some money in phase 2, which means, in phase 3, it's going to be about accomplishing the same set of requirements for probably less capitalized dollars. Budgets are still finite, and they're probably going down just due to economic conditions. Even if with IT spending, I think scheduled to go down several percentage points year over year, security spending roughly to be flat. I think we're both now, I think both are now expected to drop, in the high single digits over the course of the year at the very least. It'll be up to, security organizations to figure out how to do the same job, but do it for less. And there'll be a number of different areas to be able to do that. So I think that's how the spending is going to drive out over the course of the year. But I think then it's going to be up to us to do the same kinds of things of delivering training and bringing on people and conducting business as usual, and just being used to doing it in a more remote way. Much like we're conducting this interview over Zoom, and we'll be doing a lot more of training and education and those kinds of things over the same types of remote technologies.
Yeah, I don't know if you see this as well, but I'm seeing a lot of customers going through the exercise of consolidating product lines. They're looking at, how do I take 50 products that I currently have within my organization and slim them down to 25, right? And maybe they're realizing an economies of scale from there. And I'm almost looking at it like they're doing it for efficiency, but they're also doing it for cost savings. Are you seeing the same thing?
Oh, we absolutely are seeing it. And it's actually for good or for bad, it's actually played very well into our particular message, because RSA Net Witness has really talked about the value of a platform and a set of security tools and security platforms that hold all of your data into a singular platform. And so we've definitely seen that. We've had a number of our, as I said, our customers pick up, maybe they were on the network side or they were on the log side, and they've now picked up endpoint and added that in. We've started to see, as I said, we've entered into phase 2, where I now have some customers who are on the network side and saying, well, hey, I have a SIM. It's fairly expensive. I already have your infrastructure deployed. What would your price look like? And that's, ability to sort of consolidate. And I think it does play into some of the simplicity that organizations want to see within their security providers. There's a round of consolidation that was, about to happen or had already started over the last 6 to 8 months. I think it will accelerate due to market conditions as customers look to bring in a smaller set of security vendors that can offer platforms that are fully integrated, that can solve a complete set of problems for them so that they don't have to engineer the integrations themselves. But we've definitely seen that pattern, and I think it's one that's going to continue.
Mike, do you also, the other trend I expect to see out of this, to your point, is I have to do more with potentially less and get my job done, is enters SOAR, orchestration automation. Are you definitely starting to see some of the uptick in leveraging the SOAR platforms to automate and at least better orchestrate some of the requirements that you need out of the SOC these days?
Yeah, we've seen that acceleration already start. It had started over the last 12 months or so, not just at the large customers in the largest environments, but the value to be had for the SOC, even in an enterprise or a medium enterprise that has a 5 or 10 person security team, is starting to be able to see value in the SOAR platforms as they've matured. And when I look at things like RSA Orchestrator, as they've continued to move forward, the ability for a smaller team to take advantage, again, maybe not because they want to engineer playbook automation and reduce the hundreds of cases they're getting around phishing, et cetera, across their enterprise, but now it's about, can I simply make the ability to handle incidents, unify the place where incidents are managed across my entire security tool set? Can I have them all in a single place so I can bring them together? I can sort through the ones that are related and touch some of the same people or same assets, and see them in a way that now makes me more efficient. And I think, orchestration and the SOAR platforms are one of those places where you can very quickly see ROI as you start being able to think through, well, how many incidents did I handle roughly per day, per week? And now how many can I handle once I've implemented SOAR? You start very quickly be able to do math and get, for once, that mantelpiece of ROI on a security investment.
Yeah. I mean, we talk a lot about Paul's Enchanted quadrants, and we've seen very few vendors kind of hit all 4 quadrants. Mm-hmm. But when you take the 4 quadrants, have them integrated, and then you wrap SOAR around them, I think there is a lot of value to an organization to do more with potentially less.
Yeah, I think, as I said, Paul and I think a lot of folks who've been in the, in the industry for a while, you really start to see the value of tying these data sets together, right? And so that you can if you only have logs, you only have the breadcrumbs, the past history of what might have happened, in the park, right? You can't see everything. If you have the network traffic that you can marry to that, or the network analytics, you get an early alert into something bad that might be happening. If you have the network forensics capabilities, you can actually go back and see what happened. And if you have the EDR capabilities married into those two things, you can now investigate down to the source exactly what those actions were, what's happened, and what the blast effect of that particular incident might be based on the actions at an endpoint, because you can now investigate other endpoints to see if they've exhibited the same behaviors. If you can't tie those 3 things together into a singular platform, it's really, really hard. And then like you said, wrap that with SOAR, wrap that in with information coming from other security tools, feed that with threat intelligence, where threat intelligence is actually married to your incident data in your SOAR tool. And that's, some of the value that RSA NetWitness Orchestrator brings. But bringing those things together is the only way that you can really marry all those areas. It's not to say you can't string the 4 quadrants together and find things. But if you're stuck only looking at the breadcrumbs, or you're stuck only looking at the network traffic and then trying to correlate that to something that may or may not have happened, do you know that it was a user, phishing attack, that malware was gotten down? Do you know what the malware was? Do you have a hash that you can go search the rest of your enterprise for? If you can't do that efficiently, if you can't drive this immediate response with correlation of data that's linked together across channel, it just takes more time for your analysts to bring that whole picture together, as opposed to letting the machine do the parts, which it's really good at, obviously, of correlating large data sets. So all in all, I think Paul and I very much agree. And it's, bringing together those tools and making sure that you have a platform and tool set at the middle of those 4 quadrants that can bring all the data together. And then, like you said, wrapping the SOAR around the quadrants, that makes it incredibly valuable.
And I also think what kind of a video game pun, right, takes you to the next level is when you can get groups outside of security also using those same platforms, right? I mean, I think it's, awesome. One day we might have one platform for everything that has, for all operations and IT. Quite frankly, we're going to have, I think, a few different ones out there and tie some other tools together. But if we look at operations, right, security operations, network operations, and ops in general doing the systems work, if they can consolidate largely in the same platforms for responding to events, right, doing investigations, and incident response doesn't have to be a security incident, an incident, right, that's a huge win. Some of the other integrations get a little more difficult when we get into DevOps, because there's just I'd need probably 4x4 quadrants. I need 16 quadrants to talk about DevOps. But integrating some of those other systems in and having your core operations groups, security, and the other groups on one platform is just awesome.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Jason, that you talk about that, because we've seen some interesting use cases between RSA NetWitness, obviously, our pride and joy, but also a product that your team is very well familiar with, and Matt especially, right, RSA Archer, where, if you think about the security operations team having to get information, resolve incidents, it largely exists within the paradigm of the glass wall. And then occasionally needing to bring information out of the glass wall so that the cross-functional business can react to it, right? You have an incident that's been declared. There is potentially information that needs to be at risk, or legal needs to be engaged. We actually tie those two systems together so that an incident can be escalated out of security and into a system like RSA Archer, where we bundle all the evidence, we bundle all the work done to date, and create an incident in RSA Archer, which obviously has a much richer set of incident management capabilities, but is now ready to drive a process that becomes very cross-functional. And what we found is that, within the SOC, there's a certain set of personas, a certain set of users. They're highly technical. They want to operate quickly. They want to be efficient, and then it has to be, escalate to a set of business leaders. Those two languages tend to be really different, and the actions and compliance needs across those two organizations are really different. And so what we found is that as opposed to trying to create, one Uber platform to solve them all, that if we package up that escalation out of the SOC and into the business, we could do so in such a way that made sense for both parties, and then allowed both parties to exchange information and solve the problems in a way that made the most sense to them. And so that was an example of exactly what you're talking about, although we've taken a dual platform approach, one for a digital risk management platform that allows you to solve all of the integrated risk management use cases across the board and across the business, and a security operations use case, and tie those things together, since obviously cybersecurity is one of the largest pieces of digital risk, but it's not the only piece that comes with digital risk.
Correct. Yeah. And from an executive standpoint, being able to see which divisions or just groups of systems and or users are not in compliance, are not configured according to a standard, and correlate that to what incidents they've had, how much time has been spent, how out of date their software, tying all those various data points together and summing it up where an executive can look at that and use that to make decisions. And we've talked about it last week too. We don't want to pick on certain business units or groups of systems, right? And say, oh, look at you, you're the worst performer, shame on you. It's no, what other business units are performing better. What are they doing differently than this group? Is it resources? Is it process? Is it technology? Some combination of it, right? But without all the right pieces of data, you're basically just shooting in the dark.
Yeah, it's definitely been an area that we've explored with our customers and have seen. I think you hit on something that was incredibly important. It's not about the compliance exercise. It's not the scorecard of, business unit owner A, you're doing a great job because you have the highest scores, and business owner C, wow, you're in last place, you're 7 points behind. That's not actually the question. The question is, what are the differences? And how do we raise everybody up 2 percentage points?
Correct.
And how do we raise everybody up so that we're just a more secure organization that's making better business risk decisions that enables, frankly, us to be more successful as a business and for most organizations, and complete that digital transformation journey that we're on.
Right.
But I think, part of what you're doing is you're actually making compliance a byproduct of strong security, right? Versus the opposite effect. So many organizations are, hell-bent on the checkboxes. Having these integrated systems kind of puts you in a place where now you can have strong security posture and make compliance an end product of that.
Absolutely. And I think the only way that you start with this is when security can't be a checkbox. Right. I think, and many of us in the industry would say that, we probably don't work for organizations that have security as a checkbox, because those aren't interesting places for security professionals to be. And if you're listening to this, I would argue you probably are thinking that same way. But we want to make sure that security is something that can be part of an intelligent set of business decisions. Obviously, we have to detect threats and respond to them quickly, because that helps an organization be protected and it helps resolve digital risk in the organization. But it's only one piece of digital risk. And frankly, our goal is simply to enable the business to be productive. And, at the end of the day, I'm sure that we've all been in the position as a security professional of, being known as, security said no, or security slowing us down to do an audit, or, any one of the ways that we often get tagged as somebody who slows down business. I often think that what we really want to do is we want to be a business enabler. We're the ones who can, help an organization be able to move faster, because we have the tooling in place, we have the monitoring in place, such that as we move forward through a standard, we can collect the data that's necessary, and we can tell you, Mr. Business Owner or Mrs. Business Owner, when you've gone too far on the risk paradigm that we've agreed to. And that's where we're adding value to the business.
And that's where you and David have some very interesting conversations.
Exactly.
Mike, I'd like to thank you for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you very much for having me.
To learn more about NetWitness, Archer, or any of the offerings from RSA Security, please visit securityweekly.com/RSA Security. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.